And I went, Shazam, that's what we're going to do with them. So, you know, if you've been watching me for a while, I do an update on the ranch, usually a couple of times a year. This summer we were so busy, I haven't done one. So you're going to be watching these kind of in a series. So first off, remember, we're trying to figure out how to survive here on Ripple Ranch. You know, I mean, owning a ranch that's 44 acres, that's 20 minutes from downtown Boise, they don't give this thing away. And to be honest with you, the mortgage payment has been making life so complex for me since we bought this place. I've been really struggling to find a way that the ranch itself can self-sustain and make the payment. And so for me to just break even every year, we got to make about 12 grand a month. And how do we do that between baby goats and milk? Well, that's probably to the tone of 3 grand a month. And so that leaves a lot that we have to do here. And so doing things like our B&B and making it better and better, one of the things that we had big trouble with is this thing needed a paint job. So luckily, Ripple Ranch has a lot of people who love what we do, and people were willing to help, and especially a man named Jared, who was instrumental in getting a couple of the things done this year that we couldn't get done. But we painted the north end home, and that was not easy. This is a house built in 1916, so it took a lot of prep work and those sorts of things. But again, we continue to use these sorts of things to help us, and we're now on our 3rd year on being on Airbnb, and we went from kind of 10,000 a year to 25,000 a year, and now we're at about 35,000 a year. We're at about 3 grand a month there. So we're starting to get our steam. We're not very busy in the winter, but we are busy in the summer almost every single weekend now. So, and we use it for events, so people stay here when they're on events. So this is one of the things that we did this year to improve our offering, is just making the home look more beautiful. So we're going to roll up to the upper parking area, which if you're going to be an event center, you need parking areas. And I'm going to show you what we did up there. And you guys probably saw a little bit of that if you watch our videos. So when you have a ranch that's flowy and not flat, which ours isn't, we're in the middle of a canyon valley and our ground is not flat. Flat areas are premium areas, and they're hard to create. You got to move a lot of dirt, and then you always have retainer walls. So we wanted this area. When we originally bought this place, there was only one single little road that went down through there, and this was a hill that came down and joined it. So we had to move all this dirt. Now, moving that dirt was something that I hired to have help with, because at the time when we moved the dirt, which was last year, things were so busy, it just made more sense to pay a guy that I knew to move the dirt, and it cost me about 5 grand, but he was able to move all this dirt. What I wanted to show you about what we did this year is that the hillside began to slough, and we were getting sloughing that was happening down onto the parking pad, and taking this parking pad from a muddy mess to welly, really nice gravel, and then on top of it, the wall sloughing and adding more mud to the equation. I knew we had to do a retainer wall, but this is a big retainer wall. I mean, this is a large area. And so I saw them pulling down telephone poles on the highway near us. And I pulled over and did what I do. I asked them, what are you doing to those telephone poles? And they said they'd bring them to us. And so they brought them to us. They put them on the ranch for us. And then I didn't really know what I was going to do with them until all of a sudden this retaining wall project came up, and I went, Shazam, that's what we're going to do with them. Little did I know how much work it is to deal with retaining walls. And little did I know that the auger holes that we were going to need to dig up here were almost semi-solid eroded granite. We were spending on the hard holes between Travis and I, literally both leaning on it and really working hard, sometimes as much as 20 or 30 minutes to dig a 12-inch wide hole that was 24 inches deep. It was super hard digging in about half of these. The other side was the prep of the telephone poles. Not only are they tapered, which makes them hard to put together and still look level, they were also full of hardware, full of big bolts and things that we had to cut off, screw off, take off. And then we also had huge variance in diameters. We had, ones like you can see right over here. We had, ones that were this size and ones that were this size. And how do you use those two different sizes to make something that looks uniform and nice? And the other thing is that I built retainer walls before, and I knew we were going to need to put in dead men. If you really want a retaining wall to truly last and work, and not that I'm some retaining wall expert, I've just built a few, but putting in dead men where we actually bury a log down on the back side so that it can create its own pressure, and then this wall will always stand vertically, was a super important part of the work that we did. Now you can see we still need to add dirt, and isn't that the way it is on the homestead? Hard work never gets totally done, but once we had the wall up and I knew where I was going to get my dirt later, I moved on to another project that was more important that I'll be showing you later, which was creating the wedding space and the wedding reception area, because that's another thing we're trying to do to survive. The part about this is this gave us a lot more square footage for parking, and parking for a 200-person event, you need about 1 car for every 2 people. So that means we need a place to park 100 cars on Ripple Ranch. And so we have 3 different parking areas, and our plan worked. We had plenty of space and we had overflow space, but that was hard to create kind of from scratch. You learn as you go, right, when you're working with things. Telephone poles have a vertical wire that runs all the way down. It's like a lightning rod, and at the bottom it's a coil, and it's this really cool old school copper, soft, really malleable wire, and it has they attach this nail with a bracket that goes in, and it's hard to get off, and it takes a while to get it off. So every log, before we could place it and size it and cut it, we had to take off the hardware, and that was like 30% of the job. And then the other big part of it is these are big, heavy logs, and without equipment and forks that we could place it with, some of these were too big to handle by just 2 guys. I couldn't have imagined trying to do this with just manpower. We needed equipment power, and we needed the chainsaws and some of the bigger stuff to make it work right. And again, the job's not fully done, but I'm really proud of how it turned out. We got one little wiggle down at the end that really bothers my perfectionistic ways. But again, for the most part, this is a really cool thing. One of the things, if you're ever going down this, all these logs have these cool tags on them that have been there for however long the telephone pole has. And these are like dates and where it came from. And as we built this and we went that way, we left more and more of these, like, leaving things like this. I would have wanted to do more of that if I would have known kind of the character it adds. So on these verticals, leaving things like this, I would suggest if you're going to work with telephone poles, leave some of the hardware, and we even left more down there on the far end. At the end, we really got where we saw that as a kind of a point of character or uniqueness or history that was with the telephone poles. So something to consider if you're ever working with those, and it's something to consider that if you're kind of a person like myself that likes to repurpose things, when they're cutting down telephone poles along the roadway, they don't usually have something to do with those. They're looking for a place to put those that's close to you, and they replace those decently often. So that's kind of this section. We're going to go on to what we did over there further